Good morning to all our viewers out there. Thank you all for joining us again. This is our third session of the Closing the Gap series. Very influential topics here that we would like to chat here with you today that we have in previous sessions. Want to wish everybody a happy Women's History Month. This is a very important topic that we need to continue to address. A lot of different unfair treatment, oppressions, lack of access out there that have really damaged all of our women in a number of different ways. However, we do have a number of different solutions out there. We've seen a number of different women set great examples for us, and we want to continue that fight and continue that push on here today. We want to welcome you again. My name is Eddie Gill, lead advisor of Wise Financial at Northwestern Mutual. I want to thank Wise Financial for being a part of this and supporting this so important cause. Want to thank InnoPower and the Indianapolis Recorder for being able to facilitate all of this and put this out there into the community, and really appreciate everyone's participation here today. We can't do this without great panelists. We've had great panelists up to this point, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists here today. Thank all of you for participating here today. I will start here with Ms. Ivory Salmon. Ivory Salmon is the Vice President of Business Banking Relationship Manager at KeyBank, where she advocates for and provides financial resources to companies across Indiana. This includes capital resources used to fund commercial real estate transactions, business acquisitions, franchise startups, as well as permanent working capital. Her work in financial services began in 2003. Ivory serves as an active member for KeyBank's African American K-Bing and is a key for women certified advisor. Ivory has held various leadership roles for financial institutions both in Chicago and in Indianapolis, where she has been nationally recognized for her leadership and service in the community. Ivory is a Chicago native whose interests include listening to podcasts and cycling. Without further ado, any opening thoughts from Ms. Ivory Salmon? Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. And I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to be with you guys. Happy Women's History Month. I think it's so important that we have platforms like this to provide resources for the women of our community. So thank you, Eddie, for moderating, and to the Indianapolis Recorder, InnoPower, Northwestern Financial, as well as Mutual, and Wise Financial. So I'm prepared today to discuss some information as it relates to not just, I know we'll talk about the wage gap, but primarily the perception of women in the workplace. I know I've been in banking for about 20 years, so I'll share a little bit about that perspective. I'm also prepared to share a little bit about my background and my history, and then some ideals that I have in terms of how we can help to close the gap, some resources that are available, and just some ideals that I have from some reading that I've done, and how we can close the gap here in our community. So very, very excited to be here. I want to afford time, for the other panelists, and ultimately to answer questions of all of our listeners today. So again, just very, very excited.
Thank you, Ms. Salmon. I really want to kind of highlight one of the things that you mentioned there. This is an open dialogue. We want to encourage all of our viewers and listeners to chime in. There's a chat box there available to you if you have questions, making sure that we are able to answer some of those questions and provide some of those resources and social capital that you may be looking for. So really appreciate that, Ms. Salmon. So next will be Lexi Johnson. Lexi Johnson is an international speaker, a licensed financial coach, entrepreneur, and co-founder of the Global Smart TV channel, Lex Z TV. This will be launching in March of 2021. Looking to hear more about that. During 2008 to 2011, God led Lexi through a series of tumultuous events that changed the landscape of her life forever. Discovering who she is in Christ, learning her earthly mission, and submitting to it has allowed God to use her in ways unimaginable. Affectionately known as Miss Worldwide, Lexi has many accomplishments in the U.S. and abroad. Lexi has an MBA and a host of certifications and licenses. She is on a mission, #100ThatHelp100, to help women entrepreneurs create wealth for the purpose of advancing the kingdom. She does this with 3 steps: revealing and teaching financial concepts traditional financial institutions will not, Money IQ online course, establishing your written step-by-step financial game plan. And last but not least, assisting you in executing your plan. With outlets in 8 states, Lexi also provides independent contractor opportunities for women across the U.S. Without further ado, Ms. Lexi Johnson. Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's an honor to be on this panel today. I'm among some very distinguished and esteemed ladies and gentlemen in the community, and I'm excited to be here. Today I'm going to be sharing some things on the pay gap as it relates to Black women. We're going to talk about generational wealth, which I'm really, really passionate about. We're going to also talk about some solutions as well. I'm excited to be here and just excited to be a part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. Really happy for you to join us here today. Next up, we have Ms. Alicia Ramsey. Alicia Ramsey is a graduate of the University of Akron and received her master's in educational leadership from Indiana University. Ms. Ramsey worked in many leadership positions for Perry Township, served on the school board for Pike Township, and the governor's board for people with intellectual disabilities. Ms. Ramsey is currently the Chief Operating Officer at New Life Worship Center. Serves on various advisory boards and recently launched the She Words podcast under her business AR Consulting. Mrs. Ramsey has been married to Pastor John F. Ramsey Sr. for 25 years, and together they have 3 children. Ms. Ramsey, thank you so much for joining us. Please offer some opening remarks.
Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to be here today among some amazing women. I am blessed to be here as an African-American woman. I apologize for logging in late because I'm always a mother first and doing my best to keep my family balanced, but yet there are some things that I am passionate about, and speaking into the lives of women is one of those things. So today I am excited to have the opportunity to share a little bit about delayed gratification and listening to the wisdom of these women on the panel, also to share resources that are available here in the state of Indiana, along with some experiences that I have had in being a spiritual advisor, a leadership coach to young women that have beat the odds. It is possible. And anyone that is listening today, they will find out just how they can make that happen due to the strategies and the information they're going to receive today. Thank you so much for the invite.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ramsey. Thank you for being a part of this great movement here. Last but definitely not least, Ms. Pat Gamble-Moore. Ms. Pat Gamble-Moore currently serves as an Indiana Market Manager for Community Development Banking at PNC, where she is responsible for managing the community development results within the central Indiana and northern Indiana market areas by assessing community and customer needs and delivering financial and intellectual resources to meet those needs. Prior to this, she owned her own consulting business where she specialized in organizational development and capacity building for nonprofits. She has over 25 years of retail, commercial, and wholesale banking, community economic development, and philanthropic grant-making experience. She currently serves on numerous boards / committees, including Second Helpings, Volunteers of America, Ohio and Indiana, and New Hope of Indiana. Ms. Gamble-Moore received her BS from Ball State University in Management. Without further ado, Ms. Pat Gamble-Moore.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I am completely humbled to be on this panel after hearing the bios of my fellow panelists. And excited to talk about the work that we do here from a community development perspective, access to capital for businesses, and whatever other conversations we may get into. I'm just honored to be here. Think this is going to be a very fruitful conversation and looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gamble. I really want to encourage all of our viewers, really, again, as we dive into some of these topics, feel free, and we really encourage you to chime in with chats in terms of what your questions may be, your concerns, how can we potentially assist in some of these different areas, because it's more about the solutions. We obviously want to highlight some of the issues and concerns that are out there, but we also want to provide solutions to assist those in need right now. With the pandemic hit, we know that Black and Brown communities were hit far greater than some of these others, and they definitely had greater impacts on the women in those communities. So we want to be able to provide those resources. Wanted to start off with Ms. Ivory Salmon on a couple of different topics here, and really would love to get your insight and wisdom on some of these. You mentioned that you have some personal experience from a business standpoint in what you've seen in this capacity. Please share some of those, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eddie. So a lot that I've noticed over my years in banking. So my career started in banking, as you indicated, in 2003. And I won't talk about the pay gap. I know we've got a panelist for that, but I do want to share for the good of the group. Studies show 70% of Black mothers serve as primary breadwinners for their families, right? That's a pretty staggering number, right? So when you think about the impact that has on our dual role, right? So as we enter into the workplace, that creates a perception amongst our male counterparts. And we are often, unfortunately, not taken as seriously, especially in leadership roles, because many of us have this hybrid role. Alicia brings up a good point that she is a mother first, right? So it meant that this call had to wait. And so when we think about things like that and the perception that it creates in our community, I think oftentimes when we are in leadership roles, it has an impact on the perception that our male counterparts have on us. And I think it's important, to address that, because we are the people as moms who have to take the time off of work to take the kids to the doctor. We're the people who have to, we may be a couple of minutes late because the bus was late. We hold a lot of that burden. And so for me, I think it's important, that's a very delicate balance. And so I've been blessed, over the years of my career, and sort of being poured into by women in leadership, and being able to better ascertain how they were able to create that delicate balance. And so I think we'll talk later in the call today about the impact in terms of, a little bit about my history, as well as things that we can do to sort of mitigate that. But the biggest thing for me is in relationships. We're going to talk a little bit about relationships later in the call. But I think it's a delicate balance, right? We really have to figure out that balance, and don't be afraid of who you are. I think it's really important as Black women not to be afraid of who we are and what we contribute to the boardroom, what we contribute in our careers, what we contribute to our community and to our families. And that shouldn't be something that we kind of duck under. We should wear that boldly. So that's a long-winded answer, but that's kind of my perspective as it relates to the perception of women in the community, especially in the workplace.
Thank you for that, Ms. Salmon. A question just kind of as a follow-up. You mentioned the delicate balance of being the primary breadwinner, and then also being a mother and taking care of the home. And I myself, I lost my father at 11 years old, so I had a single mom. She's wearing every single hat in the house possible for me and my little brother. I quickly became a father figure for him at a young age. But how does the tying that together with the corporate world, especially if you're trying to climb the ladder into leadership positions, what have you seen the most success for, whether it's for you or people in your immediate circle? What do you see as the most success to climbing that ladder? What are the solutions there?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The biggest thing is I'm a huge proponent of leveraging your village. I think it's very important. As you indicated in my bio, I am not a Hoosier native. I'm not from Indiana. I didn't know anything about Indiana prior to coming here. I was relocated here for a previous marriage. And so I was just kind of stuck, right? Like I was stuck here. I had this baby. Shortly thereafter, I was divorced. And I was just kind of finding my way, right? And so I'm a huge proponent of creating and leveraging your village. I think as mothers, all mothers, primarily Black mothers, we have a tendency to have this strength about ourselves, and that we don't ask for help. We don't leverage our resources. We are oftentimes the first ones to raise our hands to volunteer for the church. We are the first ones to volunteer at the PTO meetings. We chaperone the field trips. So we raise our hands to help, but we don't always raise our hands for help. And I think that it's really important that we take a step back and say, okay, even God didn't create heaven and earth in a day. It took him 6 days to do it. And so I think we consider our need for help as being a weakness. And I think some of our counterparts tap into their resources just a little bit more effectively. So to answer your question and kind of circle back, I think the importance of leveraging, creating a network for yourself, not being afraid to ask for help, not being afraid to share, I am struggling. I have a meeting, I have a call at 11 o'clock, and I need you to keep these babies. I mean, really, I can't be more just kind of direct about that. I mean, that's really the biggest thing, for me.
That's huge. I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. And I think that's a big piece and big component of it is leveraging your village, using that social capital that may be around you, and then also just the transparency. It was something I heard a long time ago. Everyone you meet is going through something you know nothing about, and in some of those cases, they're going through some of those same struggles that you are. So being able to relate to people and really just open up. Obviously, you gotta have the ability to trust people, and those folks have to earn your trust. But to that point, if you're able to leverage your village, and I think positive things can happen. So thank you for that, Ms. Salmon. I'll move on to Ms. Johnson here. Got a question in terms of, you mentioned the pay gap. I'm really interested in hear what your personal experience is or business experience, and kind of your insight and wisdom on that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons why I'm in the financial services industry is because of, my own personal experiences, things that I have gone through, and not only pay gap experiences, but again, the housing crisis in 2008. That's where really my financial turmoil began. And I'll share a little bit more about that when we get to talking about that point. But in terms of the pay gap, the Equal Pay Act was passed in 1963, and here we are in 2021. We are still talking about equal pay for women, and so the progress has been very slow, very painful in a lot of ways for women. We're looking at, we talk about, 80 cents difference. That's for all women. But when we talk about Black women, we're talking 63 cents on the dollar, Native Americans, 60 cents on the dollar, Latinas, 55 cents on the dollar. And so there's still a lot of work to be done in that area. And, when you think about the money that women are missing out on, and I think about, as I worked in corporate before I became an entrepreneur and a single mom with 3 children, having a job where I was making, and not to be boastful or anything, but I was making about 70,000, but it was still, with 3 children on my own, not enough. And so, you think about what you could do with the monies that women are missing out on. And just to give people out there listening some perspective, that money could have paid for more than 2.5 years of tuition and fees for a 4-year public institution. It could have paid for 31 months of childcare. As a single mom of 3, I was just blessed that, I had my mom in the area who was able to care for my children, because Lord, if I had to pay for childcare for 3 children, that's all I would be working for. It could have paid for 16 additional months of premium for employer-based health insurance. And this one is one that I'm really passionate about. If you take the amount of that 2.5 years of tuition and fees for a public university, that's about $25,000. Now, if we had that $25,000 using the rule of 72, and if you're not familiar, those of you out there listening, about the rule of 72, please learn the rule of 72. This is about compound interest and how it works in your favor. The rule of 72, using that at a rate of 9% rate of return, that $25,000 over 10 years would have grown to $61,284, right? So when we talk about, the pay gap, we are not just talking about, what we're missing on the dollar, but we're also talking about how we could have taken that money to make more money, to create more money and get on that path to generational wealth. Like over the first 10 months of the pandemic last year, 154,000 Black women left the labor force. And either they were forced out of the labor force, or because now we've become teachers in our own homes and so many other things, we've had to come out of the labor force. And so the harm was not just done in 2020. This can potentially create lasting harm, on top of the pay gap. Before the pandemic, Black women represented about 22.3% of women in poverty. And, we only make up 12.8% in the in the population overall. And so when we talk about pay gap, there's definitely a lot of work to be done. Personally, I've had my struggles when I was in corporate, fighting for, knowing that males who were hired for the same positions, management positions or directorate positions, were being paid way more than I was being paid, for the same work. And so there's still a lot of work to be done.
Those are staggering numbers, and appreciate you sharing those. I think we all can come to an agreement and say we know that there's some very huge disparities in these numbers, and we know them. But when you hear them, it's a slap in the face, right? And we have to clearly have to do something about them. But really appreciate you being on, and really we can learn more about what we can absolutely do ourselves to try to change that and give ourselves better opportunities. So thank you for that, Ms. Johnson. I want to move on to Miss Ramsey here. In our prep call, you said something that really has stuck with me, and it means so much to a variety of things. And you mentioned the importance of delayed gratification. I know you have a couple other things that you'd like to address, but really love the theme of being able to have that delayed gratification in terms of what you're trying to create for yourselves and your family. So without further ado, Ms. Ramsey, thank you.
Yes, the information has been phenomenal thus far. I'm a big statistics person. I was like, oh, shoot, I should have been prepared to write my notes. So hopefully this is recorded so I could go back and get the information.
I'm over here. I got my pen going.
I know, definitely from her. But similar to you, Eddie, there are times when people look at my husband and I and they see where we are now and they don't realize how we got here. So I'm very strategic about sharing the steps, the journey, the sacrifices that it took for us to get to this point, especially when it comes to receiving your education. I share with young women all the time, it is a temporary sacrifice for an eternal gain. You make these sacrifices now, but the gain is eternal. And it's difficult for many of our millennials, Generation Z, to see past tomorrow. And when I'm trying to get them to go to the end and look, go to the end, let's look at the end and see what are the steps we're going to take to get there. Coming from a mother, I had young parents, they were 17 and 18 when they had me. And my personal foundation came out of my father deciding to leave my mother with 4 kids, no job, no car. And I remember saying to myself at 11, that will never happen to me. And I built up this drive about myself to work harder and smarter. And just like you, Eddie, I became a sister mother with 3 younger brothers because I'm the oldest at age 11. So a lot of times when people look at my resume, my leadership skills did not come from my resume. It came from my foundation and the situation I was put in and how I handled that. So education was always key to me. And it was my village in church, in my family, in my neighborhood that supported my mother through the process. And my mother always stressed, it will work out for you later. You will benefit from it later. You will benefit from it later. So I always realized that, okay, if I make these sacrifices now, I will benefit from it later. And then when I, went to college, and I must say she was on it. One thing about my mother, and we will talk about this more later, she took advantage of every free program she had access to. At that time, it was not an EPT card, it was food stamps. It was government cheese. I wore hand-me-down clothes. You know, people see what I have on now. I said, girl, I didn't start here. Let me tell you how it got to this point and what I desired to have for myself. But I am not going to share with you only this perception of you can have all these things at 20, you can have all these things at 24, because I didn't have those things at that age. And then even when it came to me dating, I was so strategic in my dating. I know we're not talking about relationships, but I wanted a man with a plan. I wasn't really impressed with what he looked like on the outside, but what were your goals? And on our first date, he talked about saving money. He talked about his 401k. He talked about a 529 before he even had children. And we lived off of one salary for 10 years. Delayed gratification. We paid off vehicles. We dealt with one car for many, many years. So those are the things that I tried to get them to understand, the whole journey that it took for me to get there. And it's not saying that you have to be married or be in a relationship to achieve those things. You can't do all things through Christ that gives you strength. That's my Christian foundation. But I also share with my young ladies that we believe that God will not put more on you than you can bear. But as a Black woman, many times we put more on ourselves than we can bear. And I am seeing young ladies in their 20s having nervous breakdowns, trying to achieve that quote unquote apple pie quickly. But you have to pace yourself. Life is a marathon. It's not a 100-yard dash. So thank you for allowing me to share on that, about the gratification will come, the blessing will come, the increase will come. But using the strategic, you know, having a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. I'm big on having those things to get to that point.
That's awesome. That's great stuff. Thank you so much, Ms. Ramsey. I really think that's so important. These intangibles that we're talking about here, I think all the panelists have touched on them. I know Ms. Gamble has some as well. The intangibles piece, the life lessons that are learned, you know, at those young ages can really transfer to a number of different things, whether it's business, personal, financial, all of those things as we move forward. So want to move on to Ms. Gamble. Ms. Gamble Moore here. I know she has a wealth of a business acumen and insight and wisdom that she's willing to share with us today, and we're definitely grateful. Thank you, Ms. Gamble Moore.
Thank you. I want to speak to a couple of things here. When I started in banking many years ago, because I think I'm the senior person on this panel, many years ago, it was still, and still is, I could be the only Black woman in the room, the only Black person in the room. Financial services has just not been a field where we have aspired to thrive. And I think there's just so much opportunity now. And I have a passion for helping our young folks think about careers in finance, economics, because as my two panelists will know, shaking their heads, it's often that we can be the only person having a conversation about business and credit. And going back to just your foundation, I grew up in a 2-parent family in a very small town, but my dad worked away from home. He traveled every week. So 5 kids. My mother was there to raise 5 of us. She didn't work, but she ruled the roost. She was an entrepreneur on her own. She went out and we don't know how she did it because she didn't work, but she got a loan to buy a house, which is unheard of these days, right? She got a loan to buy a house. She turned it into a boarding house, and she rented it out to the railroaders that would come in and out of town. And so I learned the value of a side hustle, very, very early age. My parents, again, my dad didn't make a lot of money, but what money we had, he used to take care of us. We never wanted for anything, but it taught me the value of taking care of your obligations no matter what, maintaining good credit, following through when you say you're going to pay someone back, do it, all the fundamentals. And I guess I learned my principles of finance and credit from my parents. They just instilled that in us at a very early age. Not to say that I didn't go off the rail when I graduated from college, had horrible credit, did all the wrong things that young college students do, got all these credit cards that I had no way of paying back. But my parents were there, they helped me straighten that out. So from that though, I've always been extremely passionate about credit, and I've seen the impacts that not having access to credit, having student loans, how that can really be so debilitating to a career, to you achieving the goals that you want to have, to buy a house, to buy a car, to just get a credit card. Without good credit, it just hampers you in so many different ways. So I'm just real passionate about, I've taught my daughter from the very beginning about maintaining her credit no matter what. Pay your bills on time, because it speaks to who you are as a person. As I was telling a class the other day, credit is your word. Credit is you taking responsibility for your debts. And so that, we support a lot of financial education. Eddie, I know you do as well, at the bank. That's just a core thing that we do here, just trying to make sure that as Black folks, we don't have some of the same support systems and folks to help us out. So we do have to carve that out for ourselves, and really, but I think it's really important that we teach our young folks to take care of their credit, because it affects you as a lifelong thing, right? So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to stay with you for a moment, Ms. Gamble, because I think that is such a huge piece. And you've talked about the importance of credit. You did mention making sure you're paying your bills on time. That's one way to make sure you're able to increase that credit score. Can you mention or just dive into that topic a little bit deeper and just share with our viewers, what are the things that can detrimentally hurt your credit, and what are the things you can do to improve upon that, and make it go to another level, in addition to paying your bills on time?
Absolutely. I think that fundamentally you have to own it. You have to own your own credit. You have to take responsibility for your actions, take responsibility for understanding your credit situation, pulling that credit report yearly, that as you can, taking advantage of the apps that are out there now that help you manage your credit and keep you up to date on what's happening with your credit, and not being afraid to go into a bank, credit union, and ask, right? Seek advice. I think a lot of times, especially in banking, I understand this, folks have maybe not had such a good experience in the past. They've probably been turned down for an account or for a loan. And so they're just afraid to ask now. I would say, especially when it comes to reestablishing a relationship with a bank, don't be afraid to go ask. What happened years ago, we've taken a whole different position on understanding that things happen in folks' lives, right? Offering those second chance accounts, offering those credit builder products. And to your point, another tool is there are credit builder products. Instead of taking that tax return and buying a 52-inch TV, take that tax return, put it in an account, secure a credit card so that you can get a secured credit card to start rebuilding your credit. Very basic things. Go to your bank, ask, do you have credit builder loans? How can I get started? Because again, entrepreneurship is very important to a lot of us, but getting a loan for your business is highly dependent on your personal credit. It's all tied together. So you got to get that together. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to grow your business, that side of your house also has to be taken care of. So I would just say it's all about taking responsibility, not being afraid to ask questions, seek help, research. Again, use your village, we're all on this call. I think all of us are great resources. So reach out to any of us if you have questions about starting over and how to rebuild or how to start your business with Ivory, or we're all here to help too. So start right here with this village and go from there.
That's good stuff. Thank you so much, Ms. Gamble. One thing I'll add to that is I have a 20-year-old and 18-year-old myself. They're both in college right now. And just to encourage them to make sure that we talk about that ownership piece, they will need some credit if they look to rent an apartment, buy a home, and ultimately would like to purchase if we can, instead of rent, which is burning money in the rent. We would like to own it, see that equity grow and so on and so forth. But how do we do that? Got them both small credit cards, small credit lines, make sure they pay them off on time to start building that credit. So once they're out of college, they have an opportunity to go out and maybe, whether it's a car or a home or whatever, if they have business ventures, they have some credit to show for. It may be limited, but they do have something starting out. So it's also something that they can abuse, but I'm always sharing with them, if you abuse it, it's going to be a problem. So make sure you don't abuse it. But definitely it can be a very resourceful tool if used appropriately in the right way. So
I will say, Eddie, my daughter, when she graduated and needed to get her first apartment, we had done the same thing. We got her a very small credit card, $500 credit line, managed it, watched it, and she was able to get her very first apartment on her own without us having to co-sign for that apartment. And then we went to get her a car, and that was a bigger ticket item. So and she didn't have any real work history. So I had to co-sign for her. But we went in and it took us 20 minutes to be credit approved. And I looked at her and I said, you see what happens when you have good credit? They talk different to you. They treat you different. It's like, come on, sit down. So that's always been a lesson we learn about just how different the landscape changes and how opportunities just are different when you are empowered and have that credit. And if you have a parent and you're blessed to have them help you start out, respect that, take care of that credit, build on that credit, because again, you'll need it to get your first apartment, get your first car, buy your house. It all starts. And once you dig yourself in, it's really tough to get out of a credit situation. It takes long. It can take years, Lexi. I'm sure you can speak to that. It takes years to rebuild your credit report, and especially now with all of the student loans, which I feel like is our next big crisis, and hoping that this administration will take a look at that. But I do think that's our next big crisis, is helping folks with just the inordinate amount of student loan debt that's out there.
Totally agree. Thank you so much. Ms. Salmon, I want to come back to you. In our prep call, you mentioned one thing about professional development and how important that is. I wonder if you can touch on that a little bit and just kind of provide some insight and wisdom to our listeners, in addition to any other thoughts that you may have.
Yes, sure. Thank you. So first, I just want to say this panel is amazing, and I'm learning so much. I feel like more of a student than a teacher. So thanks to all of you. You guys have given such valuable information. So just a little bit, I want to share a little bit of my backstory. I think it'll provide a little bit of a platform for what I would go into from a professional development standpoint, as some of the other panelists have shared. So I'm the daughter of a single mother who battled, she battled mental health challenges as well as substance abuse. And we grew up, I grew up, I should say, as an inner city youth on the south side of Chicago, very, very poor. At varying points of my childhood, we were homeless. We lived in shelters. We ate off of food trucks. And so people see me and they have this perception, similar to Mrs. Ramsey's, that they have this perception, and they see the car I drive or the bags I carry or the way I speak. And they have these preconceived notions that I was just born with a golden, not even a silver, but a golden spoon. And my spoon was plastic. It was very plastic, if at all. And so at a very young age, my sister, she had a full ride scholarship to an HBCU out of Nashville. And she had to come home. She had to come home because our mom was sick, and she had a little sister. She's 13 years my senior. So she left a full ride scholarship, a basketball scholarship, to come home and to care for me. And she was just a child herself. She was a 23-year-old with a 10-year-old daughter, essentially. And, she did what she could with what she had, but she didn't have very much. And she was educated, and she was smart, and she was strict, she was strong, and she instilled leadership and how to carry yourself and conduct yourself as a young lady was very important. How I represented our household when I would go to school or to church or to visit with a friend of hers was very, very important. And then she sent me off into the world. Like a little bird who leaves the nest at 18, she says, now go and be merry, right? And so I just had to find my way. And so that just brings me to the professional development piece. I started my career in banking at the very tender age of 18. I was a bank teller. I was in college. My college experience was very non-traditional in that I did adult education. So I was the person at night school with all a more mature audience. I was not in a dorm room. I did not experience dorm life. And I worked a job. I worked a 9-to-5 job at a bank, and I went to college at night. And so my sister, she's a warden now for a maximum security penitentiary in Illinois. And so we're very different. But she's always instilled a etiquette and a decorum and all those great things, but she didn't know how to wear a suit. She didn't know how to speak in a board meeting. She didn't know how to interview for a bank job. She didn't know. And so I had to find my way, right? Like I had to reach out and raise my hand, and I would find people throughout my career in banking that I would look up to. And I would tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, I'm young. I look up to you. I heard you speak at a conference, or you led this meeting, or you're this training and development advisor. And I want to be like you. How can I be like you when I grow up? And so I would raise my hand and I would reach out to these people. And there's an author that talks about, he spends 21 days looking for rejection, right? So he would just go out and ask people just random questions and in hopes that they would say no, to train himself to be used to hearing no, right? And so we're so afraid. We see these people with these long titles and they seem fancy, but then when you peel the onion layer back, you realize that there are people and they put their pants on one leg at a time, and they are more likely than not so happy to help you. They are so happy to help you. They're honored. They feel like little old me, and we're like big old you, and they're like, no, little old me, you want me to mentor you? And so, I leveraged, back then there was a LinkedIn. I would like to think that I'm not that old, but back then there was a LinkedIn. So, at 19, I joined a church. My godfather is a senior pastor for a really big church in Chicago. And that first family kind of took me under their wing. And that first lady kind of helped me establish myself as a young lady. I would tap the shoulder of people who are in politics. Politicians like to visit churches, and I would say, hey, I want to meet you. I want to learn from you. And then, transition into the generation of LinkedIn, right? And so I'm a huge proponent of reaching out to folks via LinkedIn and saying, hey, I am a new commercial lender. I've been in this role for a year, and I need to get to know people. And so I'm wondering if I can have coffee with you, if we can do Zoom coffee. And I will tell you guys, 90% of those people are more than happy to help. They're more than happy to they want you to ask for help. And so I implore the people on this call, the participants on this call, do not be afraid to ask for help. You would be so surprised at the number of people that would be willing to pour into and mentor you. Oftentimes we just don't believe in ourselves. And sometimes when even people have to remind me of, like, we don't see our worth. We don't see the value that we add, right? And so I think having those connections, raising your hand, it does not have to be someone you know. It can be a random stranger. This is who I am. This is what I think of you. This is what I'd like to learn from you. Will you help me? And I think that made a huge difference for me professionally. And some of the people, sometimes, y'all, I just connect with people just to see if they'll say yes. Just to see, I wonder what'll happen if I send Obama a tweet. Like, I just wonder what'll happen. One of the people who I pride myself on, she was the chief operating officer for the Chicago Urban League, and I love her dearly. She ran for Obama's seat in the Senate out of Illinois when he went on to become president. This woman, right? And I just said, I really look up to you. I think you're a phenomenal woman. I love the way you're poised, the way you carry yourselves, the way you connect with your community. And I would really love to learn from you. And she says, I can take you out for tea on Tuesday. I said, what? Me? And so you just have no idea. And so we talk about social capital, right? And we talk about, this word social capital. Really, it's a village. Black people, we got through this because Harriet Tubman got a group of people. It wasn't just her. She found her friends. People would weave and braid pathways into the hairs of Black women back in the day. It took a village. You needed a hair braider. You needed someone who could do hair. You need someone who knew the map to draw. I mean, we really have to, we know what we know, and we have to own what we don't know, and we cannot be afraid to ask for help. So I can't advocate for that enough. Everyone on this call will get a follow-up email from me because I've learned something, and I want you to teach me more. And so, yeah, that's what has shaped me into who I am today. And I promise those women, and I pray to God every day that if you would get me in a position where my story will empower somebody, my story will have an impact on some young woman, I will do it. I promise I will do it. I will pay it back. I will pay it forward. I will mentor young girls. For anyone who wants to hear my dark, lonely story, I will share it for the good of the growth of our community, of women, not just Black women, but of women, all little girls. I think it's really important to share that. So that's my perspective. That's how I feel. I'm very passionate about this subject, Eddie. But those are some of the things I would encourage. I would encourage everyone on this call today to find someone on LinkedIn who you like, who you look up to, and you reach out to that person, send them a DM today and ask them if you can get on their calendar for a Zoom meeting, and you will be surprised. You'll be surprised. So that I'll leave you with that, Eddie, and I'll let you turn it over to the other panelists. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. Your passion is amazing, and it's meaningful, and it's real. And I think something as small as just asking for assistance is just invaluable. I couldn't agree with you anymore. It's just letting your guard down, be a little bit transparent, and let folks in a little bit, because again, oftentimes people are going through the same struggle that you're going through, or they have gone through it, and we all just need to find a way to get out of it. So and get to that next level. So I really appreciate your passion more than anything else, because it speaks to truth 100%. Ms. Johnson, I want to come back to you. You mentioned also in our prep call the importance of generational wealth, and that's one of those buzzwords that's going around. We're starting to hear it a lot more, but the importance of it again is tremendous. If you can just touch on it a little bit. I would say please define it first, because a lot of us, we hear a lot of these different words and not necessarily knowing exactly what they mean. So please define it first, and maybe provide some insight or wisdom as to get to that place.
Yes, thank you, Eddie. And you're absolutely right. We're hearing this term generational wealth has become the buzz here recently. And, people are using it and saying it in all kind of spaces. And they're not, most people are not even sure what exactly all of that means or what it all entails, right? And so it needs to become more than just a buzzword, or this term and this thing that sounds good, but what actually is creating generational wealth. And, for me, generational wealth is about taking, what you have created, the assets that you have, and being able to pass those along, not just to your children, but you've also thought about your children's children and their children and their children, as the Bible speaks to the fourth generation, right? We need to be thinking and planning along those lines and coming up with, specific plans and taking actionable steps, to help us to do that. And, just to share a little bit of my backstory, and this is why you'll find I'm so passionate about generational wealth. My parents came from Central America. They came from Honduras. So I'm a Black Latina. They came to this country, in their late teens, and they had no clue really. I mean, they're learning a whole new country, but then to have to learn about how money works and all of those things, it just wasn't, they just didn't know what they didn't know, right? What they were able to pass on to me was a great work ethic. They were able to pass on, hey, pay your bills, and save some money, right? And that was about the extent of it. Most people's families or backgrounds, we have this for whatever reason, we just don't talk about money. The wealthy people talk about money day in, day out. They are talking about money, and we assume that they're talking about it in greedy ways. And they're not talking about it in greedy ways. They're talking about it in terms of making sure that their children are set up and their children's children are set up. But they're having these conversations, on a daily basis. It is, and there's nothing that they're afraid to talk about. They'll tell you, oh yeah, I went through bankruptcy and I had blah, 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 there is no shame, there's no guilt, there is no anything. And we have to get to that point, as so many of the speakers have said today, where we're raising our hands saying, hey, yeah, I went through this, or I'm going through this, or I need help, or, reaching out, and not afraid to have these conversations. We have taken on the conditioning that, we're just to be hush hush about money. We don't talk to people about what they make. Wealthy people are talking all the time about what they make, right? And so, these conversations were not being held in my home, again, because my parents just didn't know what they didn't know. But as I grew up and there were other adults in the community and in the area and college and wherever I went, I began to take on those other things. So you just don't talk about money, money, politics, and religion. We don't talk about we don't talk about these things. And we have to get beyond that. And then there's a trust factor too, right? Because a lot of times we think, okay, I'll come out, I'll be vulnerable, but then how is this going to be held against me? How are people going to look at me? How are people going to perceive, me, and not in how, and can I move forward, or will people continue to put me back in this particular, hole, where I am? And so, my story, I'm so grateful. You mentioned in my bio about this tumultuous period of time that I had in 2008 to about 2011. And it started, the lead up started before that, right? There were, I was young, didn't really know too much, about money, got into some of the same trouble that Miss Pat Gamble Board talked about, getting all those credit cards and all of those things. When I had my first child, I was 19, I was 20 when I had her, 19 when I got pregnant, 20 when I had her. And so she just had to have everything, right? So I put those credit cards to use on that I got on that college campus. So she just had to have everything. She had to have, the best crib, the name brand shoes. Didn't matter if she was going to grow out of it the next month. She had to have everything. And so that started, my downward spiral in terms of finances unknowingly. I didn't even know. And fast forward 2008, now here I am. I'm a married woman, 3 children. I had my degrees. I, graduated, got this great paying job. I'm married, the house, the picket fence, 2.5 children, and, the pet, right? Now I had fish because I'm allergic to dogs and cats and things of that nature. But, so I thought we were living the American dream, right? Because that's what you're told. Go to school, get your degree, get all that other great stuff. And so when the turmoil hit, when things hit the fan, I was left standing like, how did I end up here? I did everything that I was told to do, right? It may not necessarily always been in the same order, that I was supposed to do it, but I had accomplished what people said that I was supposed to accomplish. And now here I was, my ex-husband at that time, he had lost his job. Then I lost several months later, then I lost my job. We didn't really have much savings. We didn't really have much, of anything set aside, assets, anything that we could liquidate, right? So now we're going through bankruptcy. We lose the house, we lose cars. And then on top of all that financial pressure, we get divorced. And now here I am, a single mom of 3 children, trying to figure out where we're going to live, how we going to eat, right? All of these things that I would have never fathomed would have happened to me because I came from a quote, middle-class family. My father was a steel worker. My mom started her own preschool. So this was not supposed to happen to me, And so after I, took steps, fast forwarding to get back on my feet, here I am now. We moved into an apartment me and my three small children. It's just us and our clothing, right? No furniture, no nothing, but we in our own space. Okay. I finally got to a place we could be in our own space. Finally got back to, because during that time I was, taking jobs here and there that were paying me nowhere near what I was making. And then finally I got an opportunity and I'm like, okay, whew, breathe a little bit. I got this opportunity, right? But here I am, I'm over $300,000 worth in debt, credit cards, what was owed on the house, what was owed on the cars, what was everything else just, crashing in. And I'm like, how am I going to get out of this? There was one night where, I actually would cry myself to sleep every night. But there was one night where I came down the stairs after putting those children to bed. I would lay out on my on my living room floor. We didn't have any furniture, just lay out there and go to sleep. And I would just, that night I was crying. It was such an ugly cry. And I don't know if anybody out there has had the ugly cry, right? But it's that cry where, all the tears are streaming. You can hardly see out of your eyes, nose is snotting, you can hardly breathe, right? You wouldn't even care at that moment who came in and who saw you, because it just was what it was, right? And my thought was, God, is this it? Is this the sum total of my life? Everything that I had accomplished, from degrees and jobs and everything else, is this the sum total of my life? Because if it is, you can take me right on out of here. I'm done, you know? And so that next morning, um, as I awoke, I heard a still small voice, the voice of the Holy Spirit, that just was telling me, get up, right? And I'm like, get up and do what? But get up, and sometimes for those of you listening and, you may be going through some challenges financially. The thing, the Spirit wants you to do is to just get up. Sometimes you got to put one foot in front of the other, just one foot. You may not even know where the next foot is supposed to go or anything like that, but you got to put that one foot up and raise your hand, say, I need help. And in my case, I didn't necessarily raise my hand, but someone came to me within a week of that ugly cry saying, hey, I just sat down with this advisor. Do you want to sit down with them and, learn about money and this? And I was like, oh, heck yes. You know what I'm saying? Yes, 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 and yes. There was no shame about it at this point in my game, because I wanted to get to a better space, wanted to do better for myself, for my children, my children's children, right? And so, needless to say, I learned everything that I needed to learn to get out of that $300,000 worth of debt. Don't have that. And God has been good. He has replaced everything and more since that time. But I had to do things. I had to learn. I had to raise my hand or be willing to say I needed help. And I had to sit down, learn what I needed to learn, and then put it to practice. So now let's talk about this generational wealth, right? One of the things that I learned was that, hey, okay, what I went through was, some of it was on me, right? But then the other piece of it was 2008 was that big housing crisis, subprime loans. We were a victim of those types of things. And those things occurred not just in that time, but because of past legislation that is still responsible for current day sufferings, right? So the New Deal and redlining and all of those things are still things that are affecting us today. Black people and families, couldn't get loans during that period of time. And then when they could, it was subprime loans. And to this day, you can see where in some areas, Black neighborhoods, you can have a 4-bedroom house, 3.5 bath, maybe it's worth $300,000. But if you go to the white neighborhood, same style house, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bath, it's worth $700,000, right? These are the things that are just, they're out there and they're happening, but we can get beyond these things, and we have to go past learning about just budgeting, because it's not just budgeting. We have to, and anytime we're not having success in money, we're told, cut back your spending, and which is true, we may need to do that, cut back your spending, or you need to budget better or whatever. I was never one who just spent my money willy-nilly. I was never that. Sure, I'm not saying I never didn't have some waste here and there, but I was just never one to be spending my money on all these materialistic things or whatever the case may be. So you're telling me budgeting? I've been doing that. And that's not helping, right? So I had to learn more than that. I had to learn that there's a step above budgeting. There's allocating, where you are telling your money what to do. You become the master of your money, not the slave to your money, right? So you're allocating. And then I had to learn, again, as I mentioned earlier, about the rule of 72 and how I can make compound interest work in my favor instead of me suffering from the rule of 72, i.e., paying these compound interest as it relates to credit cards and loans and all of those things. How can I have the rule of 72 work in my favor? How can I go and invest in paper assets or real estate or business even and get returns upwards of 9, 10, 11, 12%, 22%? Where is that stuff at, right? And so the thing is, we have to be willing, as everyone has said already, talk to wealthy people. They want to talk to you. They are willing to share with you what their story and how they got where they were, right? You want to create generational wealth. What are you reading? Are you reading things about generational wealth? What are you watching? Are you watching things on learn how to create wealth? Who are you hanging around, right? Who are your mentors? Who are your people that you're looking up to, right? If you want creating generational wealth can be done. My husband and I are in the process of doing that. We have properties now. We have, land, we have properties, we have investments, we have, businesses, we have all of these things, and it can be done. You can come from a place of not having nothing, negative net worth, and having so much, right? And speaking of net worth, the white family average net worth $130,000. Black families, $9,000. $9,000. And so we just have, we have to step up. We have to take some, ownership. Yes, there are some laws and things in place that makes it a little bit harder, but there are plenty more opportunities and things that we can take advantage of so that we can be in a better position to leave generational wealth.
Thank you so much. I want to, first of all, I'll pause for a moment and just acknowledge the fact that all four of you, to some degree, have given tremendous testimonies here today, and those in their own right are invaluable. Just learning about everyone's life experience, what they've gone through, their trials and tribulations, and how they were able to fight and get through those different adversities is tremendous. So I really want to thank you for that. Not only that, dropping tremendous gems on us with the resources and solutions and how we better ourselves. With that said, Ms. Ramsey, you referenced the programming piece and how that can be of resource to a number of different people. If you'd like to touch on that a little bit more and provide any additional insight, that would be awesome.
Most definitely. And as all the amazing women on this call have said, just to reinforce that asking for help does not make you weak, it makes you wise. That is wisdom. We've all been in situations where we have had to ask for help in every area of our life. I'm big on mentorship. I always have been big on mentorship in every area of my life. So when I was an educator, even when the mentor didn't come and find me, I went and found the mentor. One was an African-American woman, and I went to her so much and in her office so much, she said, "Ramsey, I'm not going to get rid of you." And I said, "No, you're not, because I want to learn." When I became on the school board, I went to a mentor when I was on the school board. When I became married, I talked to married people. Just like Ms. Johnson said there, okay, who are you hanging around with? If you want to make more money, are you spending your time with broke people or people who don't make wise decisions with their finances? So who do you spend your time with? When I gave birth to a special needs child, that's a whole new world I was in. I didn't know what to do or how to do it. So I began to talk with people who were educators in the special needs arena, who were doctors, or who had a child like my child, so that I could learn it. And then when it comes to finances, my husband and I are big into reading, talking about it, attending seminars to learn more about how we can definitely have generational wealth. We're big into that, leaving an inheritance to our children's children. So we're not just walking the walk and talking the talk, but we're walking the walk, and we're being that example for it. When it is time for you to make this decision, because one thing I tell, young women all the time, and I know there may be men on the thread as well, but tell young women all the time, the first thing you have to do is make the decision. What do I want to do with my life? Do I want to fulfill my purpose? It's not just about attaining tangible things, but what am I called to do? Why am I here? Why am I here for this set time? And what am I going to implement during this time? And one of my favorite quotes that I learned in 1997 was from Stephen Biko, an African nationalist. Many people think it was a scripture, not a scripture. It was from him. And it says this: the most potent weapon in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most potent weapon. So as long as they have your mind, they have control of your destiny, they have control of your purpose. So while you were sitting there looking at, well, I don't have the degrees yet, I don't live in the right neighborhood yet, I'm only, an aide, I'm not the boss yet. Do they have control of your mind? If they don't have control of your mind, there is nothing that can hinder you from achieving the goals that you set for yourself. And the first goal that many of you have to understand, and many ladies have to understand, is I'm starting at the bottom, and that's okay. That's what Ms. Johnson said. Once she determined, I don't want to be here no more. And when the person came to her and said, do you want help? Because that's another thing. We pray for help. So then here comes help, but you may not like the package that it came in, or who came to you. It may be a Caucasian person or a Hispanic person or a family member, or I don't want to receive it for them. Well, you prayed for help and the help came to you. So how are you going to get this help? I'm going to accept what was brought to me, and then I'm going to do the work. Faith without works is dead. You have to put the work into it, and the endurance into it, the tenacity into it, like Ms. Salmon, the excitement, the energy into it, that I want to be here. I want to receive what you have to give me. So when you go down to apply for CCDF, do you have an attitude, or do you have a smile on your face? If they tell you you're on the waiting list, you say, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I wanted to receive it today, but I understand there's a waiting list. It's all about how you articulate yourself. And as Ms. Solomon said, sometimes you didn't get that in your home, the right dialect, or you did not learn how to decode, but you can find somebody that can teach you how to talk in the boardroom. You can find someone that can teach you how to use that dialect. If profanity just comes out of your mouth, well, how do I learn how to talk when I get upset and not use profanity? There's someone that can teach you that and can help you work through that. Also, I talk to them about stop looking at making more money, but do you have benefits? Do you have health insurance? There are resources out there if you do not have health insurance. There are resources out there if you do not have a retirement plan. It is time for you. It's called Google. I can't say this. I am old. The internet was not in existence when I started out. I started with a typewriter. Yes, Ms. Gamble Moore, I started with a typewriter. So I remember the encyclopedias, the card catalog. Now you can Google things that you need. They'll want to say that, oh, I don't want to go to Work One. These are job centers that help you with job searches. Dress for Success. I've spoken at their events, and they have programs there to help women look for career opportunities, to dress for these opportunities, how to articulate themselves for these opportunities. But it is up to you to do the work and to make the decision that, okay, I want this to happen in my life. How is this going to happen for me? When I decided to become a teacher, to be honest, I wanted to be a flight attendant. I wanted to get out the hood, and I wanted to travel the world. But it was an African-American woman professor that said, you're good at this. You need to think about getting your degree in this. And when people like that paid it forward for me, I made it a cause for myself that I'm not going to have that crab mentality and pull others down, but I'm going to lift sisters up, especially sisters up, because it can be very difficult when we do get in those spaces. I started doing homework like many of you, and McKinsey & Company looked at in 2020, for every 100 men that were promoted, only 72 women were promoted. And this is just to manager positions, because a lot of times when you get in that seat and when you are in that interviewing process, a lot of the questions are gender biased. They're not fair. They're definitely ethnocentric, yet still you want to get in that seat and you want to get in that position. So you need to know how to articulate yourself appropriately. I was asked questions like, why is it that you never miss work? Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, you didn't ask that Caucasian man that was in here before me that question, but since you have researched my attendance, let me tell you that my backup plan has a backup plan. I have a large village because they knew I wasn't from the city either. So how is it that she never missed work? I was also asked the question is, how do you involve your children in your life? Did you ask the gentleman that same question? Is what I thought in my mind, but that's not how I answered the question. So mentors and coaches and leaders in the community, people that you connect yourself to, help you prepare to get in those positions. But it is a process. You have to seek out the resources that are allotted and available to all of us. You are a first-time homeowner. Yes, you're going to do it by yourself and you're going to be able to make it happen, but use all of those 3 resources that are out there for you. I know people that were in the military that don't even use the GI Bill. Are you kidding me? That's free money. A young lady in the military said, we call that OPM, other people's money. I said, well, I need God to send me some OPM to pay for these degrees that I got. But she said, we never let that money go. So if you served in the military, there are so many programs allotted to you. If you're from a single parent home, I definitely get on parents that do not sign their children up for 21st century scholars. Here in Indiana, your child can go to school for free if they have a certain grade point average, and it's not even a 4.0 grade point average. But for me to have to call, did you sign up for 21st century scholars? Did you sign up for 20? Well, my child don't want to go to school here. That's not an option. Where can they afford? Where can you afford for them to go to college? I went to college where I could afford to go to college, and my degree is just as valuable as anyone else's degree. So learning to accept what we have here in this state, what we have here in this country that is allotted to us, and take advantage of those programs.
That is fantastic. Really appreciate you, Ms. Ramsey, providing some of those resources. And again, just some of it seems very simplistic, but a lot of us just don't want to take that extra step to do some of these things. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Ms. Salmon, you had something to add to that?
Yeah, so Mrs. Ramsey, you've been so inspirational. Many of you have shared some great things, and I just want to touch on a couple of things that I keep hearing over and over again that has contributed to my experience and my growth. You are who you hang around, right? And so if you want to be wealthy, hang around wealthy people. And you will find, I think in our community, I talk about this on the pre-call, in our community, we have a tendency not to want to spend money on things we cannot see. We wear our money. We don't save our money, we wear it. And so I talk about the example of when I had this job. I was 16 years old in high school working at Best Buy, and someone talked to me about a 401k. I said, a 401 who? I can't see a 401k. I can't wear a 401k. I'm not contributing to a 401k. 30 years from now, I'll hopefully make more money 30 years from now, and I will cross that bridge when I get to it. We have a tendency to wear our wealth. And what I noticed, because I spent some time as a financial advisor, what I noticed, I can recall very vividly, my most wealthy client, right? The wealthiest client I had in my book of business drove a RAV4. I had a Lexus in a parking lot. There was a problem. There was a problem. And I noticed, so when we talk about if you want to be wealthy, you must first surround yourself with wealthy people. You will find that wealthy people, they don't wear their money for the most part. Now, there are some outliers, right? But you don't see wealthy people wearing their wealth. They live in their wealth. They invest in property. They invest in their retirement. They create legacies for their children. They buy things like wealth transfers, and the financial advisors on the phone know what that term is. But we buy insurance products, or they buy insurance products that build generational wealth, which is another thing that we've talked about on the call. Another thing that that I want to share, especially with our young women, we are not defined by the color of the paint on the bottom of our shoes. That is not what defines us. We're defined by the head that we carry on our shoulders every day. And so people say to me all the time, especially at work, I get teased about this at work. Hopefully no one at work is on this call. If they are, I'm sorry. Why do you dress up all the time? Like all the time? Because I was raised professionally. You dress for the job you want, not the job you have. You conduct yourself in the position that you want, not the position you have. So for people who think that I am just a teller, I am just an assistant, I am just a this, well, what do you want to be? And what do you see when you look at people that hold those positions? And what are some of those characteristics and traits that you can emulate? You walk in that destiny and you tell yourself, funny enough, I wanted to be a dolphin trainer. I love dolphins. I wanted to be a marine biologist and I wanted to be a dolphin trainer, and I kind of landed in this bank job. But we have to think about, we have to surround ourselves with people that are in positions that we want to hold, period. We have to surround ourselves with people who speak the way we want to speak, dress the way we want to dress, have the things we want to have, and ask them, how'd you get there? How'd you get there? And the other thing too is our children, right? Our children. One of the panelists, I can't remember who it is, I think it was Lexi, who talks about, my daughter had to have the best. She had to have the best clothes. She had to have the best shoes, because as Black people, we don't want our children to go to school looking crazy. So we will deny ourselves food so that our kids can go to school with nice shoes on. And so when we think about the perception that we create for our children, my son likes stuff. I have an 8-year-old son and he likes stuff. I mean, just stuff, babe. Like, I mean, stuff, y'all. He likes stuff. And so I told him, I said, hey man, stuff isn't free, okay? Not only does is stuff not free, stuff deteriorates. So we're gonna play a little game. His 8th birthday was in February. I said, you know what you're gonna get for your birthday? He said, what am I getting for my birthday, Mom? I said, you're gonna get a brokerage account. You're not gonna get Jordans, you're gonna get Nike stock. You're gonna own Nike. We're not gonna buy, you're not gonna be a consumer, you're gonna be an owner. I want you to start thinking like an owner. I'll tell you what, Mommy has a brokerage account. Let's see whose stocks make the most money. So we play a little game. And so you want to buy a Beyblade? No, you want to own Mattel. That's what you want to do. And we have to teach our children. It's not to say that we can't buy nice things for our children. I'm not advocating for that. I would be a hypocrite if I did. But we have to teach them. Now, when I was 12 years old, I can recall my sister, she had her checkbook here, and we learned math in school, right? Like we learned math. And she put her checkbook here and she says, hey, I want you to balance my checkbook. Because you think, at the time she was a correction officer at the time, she may have made $50,000 a year. She says, you think $50,000 is a lot of money. I want you to balance my checkbook. Practical math. So we send our kids to school and we teach them math, and then we don't make it practical, real life, right? And so when I talk about things like when Mommy was a financial advisor, he's like, well, what does that mean? And so we talk about a brokerage account, we talk about things like that, so that when he has children, he will kind of continue on with that legacy. And the last point I just want to touch on really quick is our perception of the other people's money. I think that was Mrs. Ramsey. We don't accept other people's money. So I'm a commercial lender, right? You would not believe the amount of Black churches, Alicia, that I had to stronghold to get PPP money. But I had white owners of companies beating down my doors because we thought that there was a catch. We're not going to ask for a handout. But I'm telling you, our counterparts are tapping into those resources. And you talk about wealthy, somebody talked about wealthy people talk about money. Oh, yes, they do. And they don't brag about it. They talk about, my stocks did this. What is your stocks doing? Oh, your stocks are doing better than mine. Who's your financial advisor? And it's word of mouth. We need to get back to that village mentality where we're not afraid to say, I have a girlfriend, hopefully she's not on the call. She's a PhD. Every year we compare W-2s. You have a doctorate degree. Who made the most money this year? Let me see your investment. And that's what we talk about. We talk candidly about money all the time. And it's a competition. She's like, I want my money back for this PhD because you make more money than I do. And I've got 4 degrees that I have to pay. And so we talk about those kinds of things all the time and good and lighthearted. She's like a sister to me, but we should talk about those things. We should talk about our finances with people that we trust. Don't be afraid to ask for help. don't be afraid to, when I got divorced, I didn't have anything, nothing. I had a husband that made 6 figures. He was an executive director for the Department of Labor. I lived in Fishers. I drove a $70,000 truck. And just in a moment's notice, when he decided he didn't want to be married anymore, I had to find my way. I'm not from here. So I had to say, hey, y'all, I need help. I don't have any friends. I don't have any babysitters. Big mama gone. It's just me, right? And so I can't advocate enough, guys. I've talked a lot about on the call leveraging relationships and social capital and village and that kind of thing. But I just wanted to kind of tie it all in together and some of the things that the other panelists have poured into me and how that ties into other things that I'm really passionate about. So thank you guys so much. And thank you, Eddie, for allowing me to share today.
Thank you so much. You all have been so amazing. I want to be respectful and cognizant of our time. We had about 8 minutes left, but Ms. Gamble, I want to come back to you. You mentioned something earlier. You can tie in, whatever closing remarks you may like to provide. But you mentioned one thing, if you can take just a couple minutes to address how it is being the only Black person in the room in that corporate space, in particular, the only Black woman, maybe in the building, let alone the room. Just take a couple moments to just share with that. And then, like I said, any closing remarks, I really appreciate it.
Awesome. I think you're always just waiting to exhale, right? We call it code switching, and we don't realize the toll it plays in our lives. So you work all day, it's like you take a big, deep breath at the end of the day when you go home and you're like, can I be myself? Can I relax? It's kind of a burden, right? But after, so many years, and again, the field is changing. I'm so inspired by young women like Ivory and Lexi and that are being bold in this field. But I want to close with this. And this is something that I always told my daughter, when I'd say to her, how are you going to pull that grade up, or what's your plans? And she said, well, I hope that, and I would say, hope is not a strategy. And I think that summarizes what every woman in this panel has been saying today. You have to own and have your own strategy for how you're going to overcome your challenges. You can't hope it away. You can't bury your head in the sand. You can't, like Lexi, want to cry it out. Once you cry, then you got to put your action plan together, right? And I will say, one of the things I'm just most jazzed about that ties to what Ivory said about helping our kids understand finances is that about 20 years ago, 15 or 20 African-American women who belonged to my sorority started an investment club. And that investment club still goes on today. And I was blessed to become a member about 4 years ago. Our portfolio has grown to over $350,000. We have 20 members now from ages 30 to 85. Imagine Black women in the room talking about earnings per share, price earnings ratio, small caps, large caps, a very powerful experience. And so I've told my daughter, I said, I don't know if this is the right one, open a Robinhood account. So she opened her Robinhood account, just like Ivory. We talk stock. She's a biochem major, so she's buying a lot of biotech stocks. Very powerful experience. And our investment club is $25 a month. That's all you have to contribute, $25 a month. Who doesn't have that? Who doesn't spend that on Starbucks? And so I would leave that. And what this does is having those conversations empowers you when you are talking about your 401k. When they're saying, I have you invested in small cap, I have you invested in large cap. Our members now understand what that means, and they can engage in that conversation with their financial advisor. They're not being told, we have you in this is your plan. They can actively engage because we're learning those concepts of the stock market, and it's extremely powerful. So I would just encourage, if anyone's on the call and wants to know any more about starting an investment club, it is a journey, but happy to share that because it is one of the most powerful things that I think we can do for ourselves and for our children's future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gamble-Moore. Really appreciate that. Just got a couple minutes left. I want to make sure I get to Ms. Johnson and Mr. Ramsey. I'll come to you first, Ms. Johnson, if you have any closing remarks.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you, Eddie. Thank you to all of our panelists, Ms. Salmon, Ms. Pat Gamble-Moore, First Lady Alicia Ramsey. Thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. And I just have 3 points that I will sum up with. The first, and Eddie, I think you'll appreciate this, is that, any winning team, when they win, they play both offense and defense, right? They play offense and defense. You can't just play defense and expect to win. You can't just play offense and expect to win. You have to play both. And so, in terms of what that means for women and our finances and creating generational wealth, one of the things that I'm saying is, we play defense. We're doing that by, sitting and waiting and see what legislation is going to do. And I'm not saying, we shouldn't wait and see what legislation is going to do or even be part of those conversations and fighting for legislation and better workplaces and equal pay and all of those things. That's great. We can do those things. But we can also take the offensive, right? And taking the offensive means go out there and create your own paycheck, right? It is, I'd say to everyone, it is important that everyone has, if you don't want to be a full-blown business owner, have a side hustle, but you need to be doing something else other than depending on someone to write your paycheck. When you have your own thing, okay, whether it's a side hustle or a full-blown thing, you are in control. You decide when you get your pay raises. You make those decisions, right? And so, and I don't say that as if it's, overnight and easy to do those things. That's a process in and of itself, but it can be done. And once you get it going, closing that gap definitely is becomes reality, right? That's how I've been able to close that gap. I just had to step out of corporate, come, and I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but I own my own business, few businesses, right? Through independent contracting, full out business ownership, all of these things. So you want to play both offense and defense, right? And then the last thing that I want to leave you all with is that if you do not know what your financial independence number is, if you've never even heard that term, okay, we need to talk because you need to know what your financial independence number is. And basically, that's that number down to the dollar amount that you will need not only to retire and stay retired, but also to transfer wealth over to the generations that are to follow. Two of the biggest ways that we can transfer wealth is through business and through housing. And so we need to do a better job of making that a priority in our homes. We need to do a better job of learning what that is, taking the steps to do that. And so again, if you don't know your financial independence number, we need to talk. Reach out to me. I'd love to help you figure that out. It doesn't even cost you. I can tell you what the formula is so that you can get that doing, because you've got to have that ultimate, what are we shooting for, so that you can know what are the different tactics now that you're going to play. Is it business ownership? Is it investing in paper assets? Is it real estate? Is it a combination of all of these things that's going to help me to get to that number? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. And last but definitely not least, Ms. Alicia Ramsey.
Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to be with such amazing women today. I started out 2021 sharing with women on all of my platforms that this is the year that we need to focus on our mental health, our spiritual wealth, and our physical endurance. If you are financially bound, it affects you mentally, it affects you spiritually, and it affects you physically. African American women are dying. Before COVID hit, high blood pressure, strokes, we suffer from migraines. We are becoming debilitated in things that we have the power to control. And there are so many keys to success that have been given on this call today. And I am sharing with you that I've learned something today. And I know that many of you that are on are going to watch it later. You can learn something today. So make sure you go back and watch it in its entirety and do your best to realize that if I can take at least one of these principles, it's going to benefit me mentally, it's going to benefit me spiritually and physically. Because as all of the women said, our goal is to leave a legacy, and it is going beyond us as we look into tomorrow. And I believe always the best is yet to come. And what can I do to make a difference in the lives of others? So focus your faith believe that it can get better, and continue to pace yourself in this marathon, and you will achieve your goals. You've had ample examples here today of women who, as Drake said, started at the bottom. Now they're here. They're here because they did the work. Thanks so much, Eddie.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And in closing, I really want to thank you all for your participation. Thank you, Ms. Salmon. Thank you, Ms. Gamble-Moore. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you, Ms. Ramsey. You all four of you have been amazing. This panel couldn't have gone any better in my eyes. I may be a little bit biased, but I'm telling you, all four of you have been amazing. Your testimonies are beyond invaluable, and you really dropped some real gems in a tangible form as well. So really want to thank you all for your participation. Thank you to Emil Ekior and InnoPower. Thank you to Robert Shagog and the Indianapolis Recorder. Thank you, Wise Financial and Northwestern Mutual, where I reside and live and breathe. And really thankful for this opportunity and grateful. Hopefully everyone was inspired and really took some information from here today and apply it to their own lives. Thank you and enjoy it. And really join us in our next Closing the Gap series as we continue. Thank you.